Hey guys! Hey, it's been a while. So, just so you know, it's been 3 years since the last time I did this. So, I've gone through some thoughts, I've gone through some thinking and soul searching and a few other things. But because of the positive words of my colleagues on this, I have decided to return to reviewing games! So, with all that out of the way, and with those positive words of affirmation from my colleagues, let's dive headfirst into Flashback, The Quest for Identity Remastered. So, the story. You are Conrad B. Hart. You are being pursued by a race of shape-shifting aliens known as the Morphs because you stumbled onto their secret plan for world domination. I know, it kind of sounds a bit cliche with certain things and kind of out there, right? Well, you know what? The way it's told in this game is actually really interesting because once you get into the game and you kind of play through its story, its sections, and everything else, you start to notice elements from certain movies. Like, for example, some of the city designs and things like that could conjure up images of things like The Running Man, Blade Runner, or stuff like that. Some of the others could possibly have connections with things like Total Recall, with the whole memory angle, and of course the shape-shifting aliens probably from They Live. And for those of you out there who are film buffs and you play this game, you'll probably pick up on those elements almost immediately. For me, like, I am a film buff, but I didn't really pick up on those things until I had played through this like a few different times. But what I can honestly say is that from all these elements that are picked and taken from all these different movies are blended and added into the story in a really good way to make a well-made, comprehensive package. It's action-packed, it's got intrigue, it's got all these things that are honestly working together for one another's benefit, and it will keep you honestly on the edge of your seat from beginning to end. And you're going to want to know what happens to Conrad, and if he succeeds against the Morphs, and if he's able to even find his memory or things like that. The gameplay in Flashback Remastered really isn't too much of a stretch from when it came out back in the early 90s. But you know what? That's honestly not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, I'm not saying in any way the controls in the original game were flawless or anything, because they weren't. But then again, they weren't horrible either. But I would like to think, and if you want to correct me if I'm wrong in saying this, you can let me know down in the comments and whatnot. But I'd like to think that at least with the remastered version of this game, that they've at least heightened them up, made them a bit more responsive and grounded in the realistic movements of the character that they tried to put into this game when it was released back in the early 90s. But because games have come so far over the last several years, I'd like to think that they've at least learned a few things from modern games and decided to take a few cues and be like, okay, yeah, Conrad B. Hart will move moves like this and moves like that, but we want the player to be able to control how fast or slow he moves. Because I mean, in this game, there are platforming elements, there's running movements, and there's even gunplay here and there. Now, when I say running and platforming, a few things probably come to mind, such as like Super Mario, Sonic the Hedgehog, Crash Bandicoot, and Spyro and things like that, right? Well, the platforming in this game is somewhat different from that, because with Conrad, when you're moving from one side of the screen to the other and you decide to either jump or you decide to stop suddenly, there's some momentum, there's some weight to what he does. And the thing is, you actually pick up on that probably within the first like 5 minutes of gameplay and whatnot, like because the movements are so, fluid and human-like and whatnot. But that honestly speaks a testament to when this game first came out back in the early 90s, because you know, they were experimenting with rotoscoping and things like that. And in all honesty, and maybe I'm looking at this with rose-tinted glasses or whatever, I don't know. But I honestly believe that that rotoscoping movement and those realistic proportions and momentum and things like that honestly work for this game's benefit because Conrad isn't like floaty. He's not superhuman. He's just human. You know, he's a regular Joe like you or me or whatever. And so, you know, he goes through his journey. You're controlling him. You're fighting enemies. You're finding keys. You're finding items. You're recharging stuff and all that sort of thing. But it's got realistic movement. There's realistic momentum to it. And in all honesty, I believe that's one of the elements of this game that I find extraordinarily fascinating. And I hope that if you decide to pick up this game, that you do as well. So the looks of this game. Honestly, with the remastered, it's not exactly a massive stretch from how it looked and was presented in the initial release. But you know what? With the remastered though, a lot of the pixelation itself has been smoothed out entirely and whatnot. And you know what? If you want to play it that way, you do have that option. You do. And in all honesty, I think I think that's a really good thing for people who are just picking up this game for the first time and they just want to, you know, jump right into it. But for people who grew up in the 90s, like people like me or whatever, and who are nostalgic for that like pixelation of things with like Conrad being all pixely and whatnot, as well as the morphs and whatnot. Believe it or not, in the game's options, there is an option to, I believe there's an option to have things pixelated, and if there's not, please let me know down in the comments below. By the way, if at all during this review there are things that I don't say or I speak out of turn about, please let me know down in the comments below if I am or not. Anyway, but yeah, the presentation of this game, like I said, isn't a massive stretch from how it was back in the 90s, but a lot of the graphics and the animation have been smoothed out and whatnot. It's basically been given a new coat of paint, and the gameplay controls have been tightened up from how they were in the initial release and whatnot. And I honestly think that with all those elements, this remastered, in my opinion, is an example of a remastery of a game done right. Okay, it's like it's the original, but we fixed certain things without completely altering the overall makeup and DNA of what this game is and was when it came out back in the day, which, in all honesty, I'm happy about that. And I hope if you decide to pick up a copy of this game, that you're satisfied with that knowledge as well. So, my final thoughts. Flashback Remastered is a solid remaster game brought to modern platforms by a group of dedicated people who loved working on this game back in the 90s. It is an action-adventure platformer. It is wrapped up in a really fun and engrossing sci-fi story that will keep you on the edge of your seat from beginning to end. And honestly, I highly recommend this game to people who are either nostalgic for gaming of the 90s, who are fans of action platformers, or people who are just looking for a gem, who are just looking for gems from back in the day that kind of went under the radar and unnoticed by people. Because that's what this game is. It's a gem. It's a diamond in the rough. And I cannot recommend this game enough to people who, like I said, are either curious about how gaming was back in the 90s, people who are nostalgic for this sort of thing, or people who are just kind of looking for something different, something off the beaten path that's not necessarily a game that fits into any one mold, but has a number of different elements that work together in a really good way. So, pick up a copy of Flashback Remastered. I guarantee you, you will not be disappointed with your purchase. So, with all that being said, I hope you enjoyed this game review, and you can all look forward to me doing more of these in the future. And if you did enjoy this, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And hey, if you even want to share me on your social networks, do that as well. Because, I like talking to you and everyone else. So, anyway, I hope you enjoyed this review, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!